Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be changing the front coil springs on this E60 BMW M5. This one is actually broke on me the other day. Luckily I haven't gone very far, so I just parked it up and left it, but as you can see that's completely broken. I think it's corroded somewhere and eventually just given up. So I'll try and give you some pointers on how to do it if you're doing this job at home. As you can see, it also started rubbing the inside of the tyre, so you couldn't have driven very far like that. So it's probably a good thing if you've got one of these to just check they're not too rusty, because they will, if they do snap, they'll leave you stranded and probably cost you a tyre as well. So okay, let's get cracking. Okay, before undoing any nuts, I like to clean them up with a wire brush just to get the crud off. It just makes it a lot easier when you're undoing the nut, and hopefully it won't bind up on the way out and cause the actual ball joint to spin inside the hub. Now on these you can use a Torx piece, T40 Torx. Tap them in there. There's a recess in the actual joint for it to go, and yeah, tap that in, get it all the way home, and you can use that to stop the actual ball joint itself spinning while you undo it with your 21mm spanner. So that's the track rod end removed from the hub. So I like to remove that first because it gives you a little bit more wiggle room with the leg. You can move it in and out whichever way you want once that's connected. So we've got that off out of the way. As I say, that was a 21mm. So next we are going to remove the Droplink arm. We'll also eventually be having to remove this lower arm. I tend to undo them on the inside, so you can leave it mounted in the hub because the shock's actually in the way, so you can't get that out of the hub that side. And then there's another arm, the sort of rear arm, that's also going to have to be undone, so we'll do the same with that. We'll undo it on the inside of the car rather than the outside. So getting the Droplink off, similar sort of idea to the track rod end. This time we're using a 16mm spanner or socket, whatever you've got, and we can tap a T30 Torx into the centre of that just to stop the shaft spinning there. Again, clean it up and use plenty of penetrating fluid on it, otherwise the nut will just bind up and you won't be able to get it off, and you'll end up cutting it off, which isn't fun for anyone. Once your nut's out of the way, you can just pull that out, leave it to one side, and just leave it hanging there. That should be fine. Next job, we will be undoing the actual brake caliper. I'm probably going to undo this from the carrier. So these two bolts here, the innermost bolts, and then we can get the carrier as well as the caliper out of the way. So first of all, you need to use a screwdriver or a pry bar of some kind, just to get a bit of free movement on the caliper, so you can pull it off and pull it off the disc there. And once that's done, you're going to want an 18mm socket or spanner. The socket would be better, using a deep socket here, and we're going to undo the carrier bolts. So these are quite tight. I used a long ratchet on the top one to loosen that off. I unscrewed that, and also used it to crack the bottom one off, and then I actually spun it the rest of the way out with an impact gun. Now it's up to you guys when you're doing this, but I opted to undo the inner wing wheel arch liner altogether, and I removed this just to give me a bit more room, bit more wiggle room, bit more access. Then it gave me somewhere to tie up the caliper out the way there. There's a hole I managed to use, put a cable tie through it. And yeah, you've just got a little bit more access with that out. It doesn't take long to get out, and you can get to these bolts for the front arms. You've got a lot more room there. It is possible without removing it, but if you want to make your life easier, then take it out. So next thing, we're going to be undoing these bolts here on the lower arms. These are going to be quite tight, and they are a little bit awkward to get to. Of course, get your ABS sensor and brake wear indicator wires out of their brackets and your brake pipe, just to give you a bit of movement, because it's not long now and we'll be pulling the leg off. So the ABS and brake wear indicator are in this little box here. So just pull the tabs on the side, and then you see the two plugs. I undone both of these. I've just got a little tab on them. Very easy to get apart, little tab, as you can see there. Push that in and the plug will come apart. Now it's time to undo the front arm. So yeah, you need a couple of spanners to do this. So use a ratchet spanner one side. Managed to do it without taking the vent out on the left there. Just a couple of 18mm spanners, one ratchet spanner, and undone it all the way. Now this one here is the rear of the two lower arms. Again, it's quite tight, but if you've got a straight spanner and a ratchet spanner, flexi head, I found that was the easiest way to do it. There's not room to get an impact gun in there. Okay, there you can see the spring. Now we're all pretty much done. It's just sort of hanging on the top mount really. Have a look at your dust covers on your ball joints. Mine aren't actually leaking, that's just penetrating fluid around there. But yeah, as you can see, easier really, I thought, to take the bottom arms off, and also you get a chance to have a look at these bushes. That one I'm actually going to push out and replace with a Polyflex bush, because that's worn. But yeah, let's get the strut off. So up top you've got this cover. This cover just pulls off. Be careful, because you have got a wire which goes into the top of the shock there, because electronic suspension on the M5. So be careful with that wire. Don't break the plug. You can gently prise it up with the pliers. As you can see in the centre there, you've got two little terminals that plug goes into. So it's a little bit delicate, but as long as you're careful, you shouldn't have a problem. And then we've got three 13mm nuts on the top, on the strut there. Make sure you've got your strut supported, and then there you go, it's out on the floor. So various bits and pieces there, which aren't where they should be anymore because the spring's broken. That's the top mount there, so we need to undo the top securing nut. Now I didn't use a spring clamp on this because the spring was obviously broken. So I just used a 12mm socket and a 24mm spanner, and use that to lock the shock while I undone it, and it all came apart quite easy. So that's the strut top bearing, and then just keep a note of what order your bits come off in and which way round they go. That's the bump stop there. And you've got quite a few bits. You've got a couple of washers, you've got the bump stop, and then various dust covers and bits and pieces. Right, now with the spring off, you can see where it's broken. It's broken about halfway down the spring. And what it looks like has happened is some of the powder coating has worn off over the years, and it's just corroded in that point. And yeah, just made a weak spot in the spring, and it's completely given up. sheared off. The car is undrivable when this happens as well, so luckily for me it happened sort of really pulling out of a parking space. Okay, so that's a new spring fitted onto the strut. That all went together quite easily actually. I didn't even need to use a spring compressor on this to mount the new spring into there. Managed to reassemble it and get the top nut on quite easily actually, so that wasn't too bad. One thing you've got to watch when you're reassembling it is don't do this bolt, this bottom arm and the other bottom arm up until you've got some weight on it. Otherwise you'll put your you'll twist your bush when you let the car back down on the ground. So get quite a lot of weight on it. You need the weight of the vehicle on it really. So ideally on a 4-post ramp, or if you haven't got that, maybe on some drive-on ramps or something. And then you have to crawl underneath and try and do those up while the weight is on the car. Also the top nuts on the top mount, up the top here, the 13 mils, which we undone earlier, they're on slots, so really mark those if you can before you undo them. And the advice would be really to get it four-wheel aligned after, because it's likely to be slightly out once you reassemble it all. But yeah, apart from that, pretty straightforward job really. I changed one of the bushes down here while I had this arm off, put a Polyflex bush in there, because there's a bit of playing that, but that was probably more difficult than doing the actual spring. So yeah, hope this video has been of help to some of you guys. I'll see you in the next one.